Mr. Ambassador of Turkey, which is a very important country, Mr. Burak Aksapar.
Indeed.
Right?
Very well pronounced, yes. Akçapar. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. When we, Federico and me, when we organized this week here, we thought that it would be very interesting to have the point of view and the general picture of the situation coming from a country so important and so active in our region as Turkey is. It's important for us in the European Union. It's important for us as an ally in the NATO. It is very important from the point of view of Russia. It's a country very active in the region, in the Caucasus, in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, even in Africa. And for that reason, we decided to send invitation to the embassy, and the ambassador was so kind to accept the invitation. He's here only for a little bit more than a month, yes. So this is one of your first activities as the ambassador of Turkey. So, sir, thank you very, very much. We very much appreciate your support. And well, as we were talking about, you may introduce sure. Your presentation at the end, which will be much more interesting, maybe. Some conversation with the students in attendance. Sir, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, General. So I don't know if. Okay, we're just doing it. Great. So until I thought. Can I take this off? Yes. I thought no presentation will be complete without the PowerPoint. Although we, as you know, something that defines my profession, diplomacy or diplomats, is our inability to use PowerPoint. So this is we're completely not talented in using PowerPoint. I've been very new in Spain, and it's a great honor and, of course, a pleasure to be serving as ambassador of Turkey in this very friendly, very important, very unique, and very beautiful country. So I was thrilled when I heard coming to Spain, but it took me about 6 months to get here because the world doesn't still as people wait for their next assignments. The world sits still, and what I was doing before I got here was I was chief of planning at the Turkish Foreign Ministry. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. I'll handle it. Thank you. And what my background is, maybe I should talk a little bit about my background, and this puts you some of the emphases that I will make. I'm on the road for 32 years. So I joined the Foreign Ministry 32 years ago, but my career has gone a little bit differently. When I'm coming to El Escorial, I thought I've been here before. So in this 1 month and a half, this was one of the first places I visited. But it also reminded me of a place called Obe Amaga. The Shape School. I was an international, staff member at NATO. I'm the first Turk to be decorated by NATO for 5 years of service at NATO HQ. And one of the things that we did as part of the service was to travel to Obe Amagao and speak at the Shape School. And I thought El Escorial is much better than Obe Amagao. That's for sure. And the library there is absolutely unique, one of the most unique ones in the entire world, but it has a feeling to it, and now it's great to be back here again. I will talk a lot about placing Turkey in a certain context. I think we kind of titled the presentation as Turkey is global, and this is something, General, which you have alluded to. We, of course, are increasingly pulled into some global and regional issues that address all of humanity, but most of which take place in Turkey's vicinity. So, I think what we do is important in the context that we live, all of us live in a very small, kind of sequestered, squeezed space that is the extension of Asia, which we call Europe, a unique zone of influence, of affluence, prosperity, of stability, but also very volatile because very much under threat because of the difficult geography that it's surrounded by. And this is a region that extends from Turkey to Spain. And this is one unit this is a unit that operates as a unit. So much so that, for instance, when a missile approaches towards Europe, and you really don't need more than 4 or 5 missiles to reach Europe to completely change everything about Europe. And so to prevent that, an X-band radar in Turkey detects the missile, and a ship in La Rota fires a missile, and then the missile is intercepted. This is how thin European defense is. This is how serious we should be about approaching defense and security. And of course, our populations are not exactly aware of these things. And most of our populations in Turkey, I'm sure in Spain and many other countries, think that, security and defense just happen by itself. So basically, defense is self-automated. But it doesn't. I mean, there are quite a few people who are working day and night to make it happen. And there are countries who are taking active making active efforts to make it happen. Now, I think one of those countries is, of course, Spain, and the other one is for sure my country, which is Turkey. And that's, sometimes we don't really like to be in that position. Sometimes we like to just take Turkey and move to the middle of the Pacific, I don't know, or the Atlantic, and then do not have this neighborhood around us and just live by fishing. Why not? It will be great. No neighbors, and probably a very different set of problems. We will still have problems because, yes, this global warming thing is a reality. Yes, and the sea levels are rising. Yes, there is increased pollution. There is this and that. There are global challenges. But I think in Turkey's context, we're also very much encumbered by challenges that are regional. So we named our presentation Turkey is Global. I'm going to try this PowerPoint on you. Please don't tell me if you hate it. I'm so bad as a diplomat in PowerPoints. So, okay, so we have the 5th largest diplomatic network in the world. So 252 missions altogether, all around the world, in every continent. People go to work and report to Turkey about what they see, whom they met, and they make recommendations. But we also find ourselves, because of this, as part of conflicts around the world. So we have representations in all the conflict regions in the world. So Ankara is a very busy place. With all these 252 missions, companies from around the world, with institutions that take a global view on things, reporting and engaging Turkey every day. So globally, we are very, very engaged, and this engagement has been increasing steadily in the 32 years that I've been dealing with diplomacy. And the world, we find out, you don't need 252 missions to know this, of course, but the world is not a rose garden. The world is a very, very troubled space. Now, I personally lived through some of these major transformations in the world. I studied when there was a Soviet Union, and my God, I knew the first Politburo members of the Soviet Union. Totally irrelevant, useless information now. I've joined the Foreign Service when there was still the Cold War. And immediately after shortly after I joined the Foreign Service, the Warsaw Pact came apart, Soviet Union came apart, and we had the 90s where the biggest problem, after we consolidated this new breaking apart thing, was the Balkans. And we dealt a lot with the Balkans. But we thought that if you sort out the Balkans, and later some conflicts in Africa, little conflicts here and there, the world would turn into a much benign place because there was no major power competition anymore. China was not China. Russia was a different thing. And we did not have this global contest of ideologies, as people like to refer to now as democracies versus authoritarianism. Well, the world was flat. This was what one American writer was saying. The world was flat, fully globalized. And he was also saying, another one was saying that, history ended. So there was no ideological contest. Now that is in sharp contrast to another transformative period that we're going through today, where we see that the international system and the very principles and structures and institutions that it's built upon is very much under question. First of all, we have the UN system. Well, it's a great thing. It has done tremendous things for humanity, but it's so bad in resolving conflicts. It's as bad in preventing conflicts. So the new secretary, he's no longer new, newly re-elected Secretary General of the United Nations has been talking about a surge of diplomacy, was trying to propagate that preventing conflicts is easier than resolving them. He's doing his best, as everyone else in New York. They're doing their best. But the fact of the matter is that UN is not something that you would count on if you were in the middle of a conflict. And that is certainly the case for the Security Council, which is not able to take decisions on. It took them 90 days to convene in the pandemic, when we had the pandemic. So let alone these political conflicts, even in the time of pandemic, it took them 3 months to sit down and decide on anything. So UN system is under huge pressure, especially in security, in conflict matters. We are seeing some regionalization now, and that is mostly driven by economics. So this idea of a flat world, this globalized supply chains and globalized value chains, this is very much under threat. People are looking for resilience and shorter and closer, more regional value chains and resilience in that context. We have fractures in alliance systems. We have a lot of tension within alliances. Some of it is less now after Mr. Trump left. There was kind of more of an uptick during Mr. Trump's era. But the NATO countries, the Western countries, were like sanctioning each other, if you remember, until last year. We have a major shift in the balance of power. And that is already asserting itself. And we have domestically in many countries erosion of what is called the center. So more pressure on political systems from right and right. We have climate change and we have cyber threats, new threats, including cyber threats. And Europe, in addition to all these, is surrounded by an arc, a circle of instability and vulnerability. And that is exactly our world as well. It's as much the Turkish world as it is a German world, as it is an Italian world, as it is definitely, I think, I will not say it, a Spanish world, but from my reading it is. So what are we doing with regard to this? So what is Turkish foreign policy? Turkish foreign policy has to set out from these observations and similar observations. I didn't want to like tire you or exhaust your time to talk about things that you already know, but just remember all the things that you could classify as risks and threats to international in peace and security. All this you have to take care of when you're designing a foreign policy for a country. And the responses have to make sense. So I call this vectors of policy. I think you're seeing it. What are the pillars and tenets that we have to build the policy that would respond to this picture? One is, of course, our strategic relations. What are the strategic relations? I would start as an old NATO hand from NATO, but my country also starts from NATO. We don't rely exclusively on NATO for our security. We have a very significant defense establishment that basically takes care of Turkey, but we're also part of an alliance network. And we have been members since 1952. We maintain the second largest army at NATO after the United States. We're among the top 5 contributors to NATO operations and missions. And we're now, I think, the 8th country in terms of the joint budget. We're supporting the increase of the joint budget as proposed by the 2030 group. We do take operational roles. The most recent one is the command of the Very High Readiness Joint Task Force in Turkey, Tekirdağ, the VJTF there. We consider NATO as the backbone of transatlantic security and also an essential pillar of our own national security. One thing that since my NATO days I keep saying is that if NATO is probably more precious than any other thing, because there is no way, absolutely no way that we would be able to recreate a NATO if we didn't have it. So if our leaders came together and we didn't have NATO and said, let's create a NATO, zero chance, I'm telling you, we would come up with an organization. So it's very precious. We take it for granted because it's there for decades and decades. Just maybe an anecdote to sweeten things. As I was going to our mission in NATO and then to the NATO international staff, I was told, Burak, that is a very wrong career move because NATO is irrelevant. It's designed for the Cold War confrontation. It's finished. So there's NATO somehow keeps being labeled as irrelevant, but it always shows its relevance because of basically the joint planning and joint missions that we undertake that cannot be substituted, in addition to, of course, the transatlantic link that is essential, I think, for European security. So, transatlantic link, the USA and Canada, I must say, I should not offend our Canadian colleagues, they're also making a key contribution. But in terms of Turkey's own strategic relations, United States is, of course, a key strategic ally. We have a strategic partnership, which we sometimes play around to create more fancy names to label our relationship, like model relationship and others. The fact of the matter is that for 70 years, we have been maintaining a very close political, defense, and less so economic relationship. Outside the defense industry, our economic relationship never really caught up with what we had with Europe, but still a very important partner. Now, as times change, the contents of the relationship also needs to change, and I would say that we're in the middle of adapting our relations to the new environment that has come about. And that is not going to be easy. We do not as yet see eye to eye on a number of issues. And when I come to some specific issues, you see that, you know, it is important that we, both the Americans and us, talk a little bit more often and kind of iron out some of the differences we have on regional matters. But we have had tremendous successes in addition to our joint work at NATO. And NATO, when I say NATO, those of us who read the history of the Cold War would remember that some 22 Soviet divisions were tied up by Turkey in the Caucasian front. So that was a very significant number of divisions that could not move without significant risk to the Soviet Union. So that we did in cooperation with NATO, but also with the United States. So this adaptation ranks very high on our agenda, especially in the Biden era. EU membership is a strategic goal for Turkey. It is what we call a long and winding road, and we don't know where it's leading. On paper, we do know, because since 1963, the objective of Turkish membership in the EU is there. The association agreement has set out this objective. It was not EU, but it was the European communities then. Then it turned into EU, and with the EU we reaffirmed that goal. And in 1996 we did something that no one else did. We joined the customs union with the European Union without being a member of the European Union. Normally you do politics first. You start sitting on the commissions and councils that decide on political matters, and then you decide to open up your markets and everything. We took a different path. We really believed in our own economy, in our firms, and we entered the customs union. And now, since 1996, basically, if you want to set up a business in Turkey, you wake up and find the Spanish companies and German companies and Turkish companies all within the same customs union. It really doesn't matter where you produce things. Goods move around. But that is an old agreement. And there is now a work to modernize the customs union to make it even more broader and deeper. For instance, a number of areas are not covered. Mostly industrial products are covered. So we're in the process of negotiating the start of the negotiations for the customs union. Complicated, but it's a process. In 2005, we launched formal accession negotiations with the European Union. So there are a number of chapters where we negotiate, and these negotiations began in 2005, and just when we thought we were negotiating, it was immediately closed. Because of basically the positions of two countries. One was France. France said, well, I'm not ready to discuss the Turkey's accession to the European Union at this point, although the negotiations about Turkey joining the European Union. So we thought there was a kind of a non sequitur there, but it was there, and the other one was Greece, who thought that I will come to Greece. We have a little bit of a problem with Greece, and who thought that this would create a disadvantage for Greece because Greece is in the EU, we're not in the EU, and that asymmetry, which I will come back to in a number of regional issues as well, that asymmetry will help them get a better deal from Turkey on issues that matter to Greece. And set it out in terms of Cyprus issue and some other issues. So a number of chapters were first blocked, and then we completely came to a halt, complete halt now in the negotiations. We are actually quite ready as far as our legislation goes to go very fast in the accession talks. But we do understand the political difficulties involved on the European side and also the public difficulties on the European side. So we're playing along. In 2016, the Syrian issue, which I'll come back to, came to a certain All right. Okay. Give me 5 minutes to exhaust this one as well. But until then, so in 2016, in 2014, Syria came to a boil, and the Americans walked back a little. Obama was not so keen in engaging in another, what later was termed as the never-ending wars. So yeah, and then he was hesitating, and the Russians came in, and we had faced a major escalation and like difficulty across the border, across a 900 kilometers border with Syria. One of the big impacts of the Syrian crisis for Turkey was the influx of these irregular migrants escaping the fighting in Syria into Turkey. And please be prepared, I'm glad you're all sitting, the number is 3.6 million people. So 3.6 million people have poured into Turkey as a result of the Syrian conflict. And so far we have paid from our own pockets $40 billion to take care of them. First we set up camps, then the camps were not enough. They started coming into our cities, and I don't know, hundreds of kids were being born every month. So and they were and we had to take care of their health, we had to take care of their lodging, we had to give them jobs, we had to build schools, and the numbers increased, it was soared to 3.6 million. Now Turkey is the biggest refugee hosting nation in the entire world. So maybe I should have put this into Turkey's global thing. We are the biggest refugee receiving nation and humanitarian spender in the world. So $18 trillion US supports way less than Turkey on humanitarian issues. That is the reality that we confront. So in 2016, we had an agreement with the European Union about some minor money, which we didn't ask for, but was given, okay. We were spending like 40 million, and the deal was for 3 billion, 40 to 3. But what mattered was, more important than money, was how we would deal with these refugees. Because basically, a number of them wanted to move towards the west, not stay in Turkey, but move towards Germany and other countries, to take up employment there, and to take up residence there. And some of them had already continued. And this created a huge problem within the EU, including in eastern countries within the EU. And we had a sympathy for what they were facing, and so we signed a kind of a readmission program, where we would take back some, and some of them would be resettled in European countries. It was not a perfect deal, but it was, as most deals go, something that we could live with. Um, and we, I think, in Turkey realized that we are on the same boat with the European Union. I'm not sure that the European Union realized the same at that point in time. But in 2016, we had another thing, which was something of a big setback for us. And quite frankly, I'm a little, shy in saying this, but we had a coup attempt by somebody who declared himself as the Imam of the world. So a cult that infiltrated the Turkish society, business, definitely the police, and I was very surprised to hear the military. And in 2016, when they realized that a lot of their members would be thrown off the military, they staged a military coup. Now, it was like one of the most difficult moments in my career because I was carrying a flag then. I was ambassador to India. And I was watching from the TV with incredulous eyes as they were announcing takeover or whatever. And I said to my family, okay, my phone is going to ring now. And somebody is going to say, Ambassador, you're not the ambassador anymore. I'm the ambassador. So this is what coup means, right? And so my phone rings, and then my defense attaché, my colonel, hands over to me the news that the military has taken control. Of course, when he says military, I probably know Turkish military closely as much as he does, having spent most of my career as in the international security departments at NATO HQ. I did my military service in Turkish General Staff as a planner there as well. So I knew that this wasn't really like Turkish military. And it turned out in the morning that this was a coup by this Fethullahist organization. And this is one factor that complicates our relationship with the United States because the chief guy lives in the United States still. So, EU membership is complicated, but it remains our strategic goal. It remains our strategic goal since 1963. One thing I can say is that a Turkey that has dropped its European vocation will be a completely different Turkey, including in its foreign policy, in the way it relates with the world, and it interacts with the world. Our European instincts, our European vocation, our European engagement in membership of the European bodies. We're a founding member of the Council of Europe, for instance. All these come to define a certain Turkey, and that differentiates us from all of our neighbors in our vicinity who do not have a similar European vocation. So we're in the process of understanding that this is going to be not so easy. We have Spain on our side, always had Spain on our side. Spain always saw the merits of having Turkey within the European Union. And Spain was one of the countries that always understood that the best way to resolve certain things is to resolve it within the EU than outside the EU. And Turkey is no longer this poor, backward, whatever country. Our economy is way better than at least half of the European Union countries. So we're in the middle of modernizing the customs union, working on a positive agenda, and try to overcome some of the two issues that I will explain with the EU. Do visa liberalization, update also migration cooperation, all in a bid to keep our EU membership alive. So, one political issue that has been truly burdening and clouding our relationship with the European Union has been the Cyprus issue, and on this I will add the Eastern Mediterranean issue, which is more like a more recent addition to this. And the Cyprus issue, now I should talk about my childhood lying down, but I basically was not born into Cyprus issue, but my childhood was spent in the middle of it. My father was a journalist, and we went to Cyprus after Turkey's operation in 1974. And that has defined my career. There's a reason why I always deal with conflict resolution and defense and security, because as a child, this tall, in 1974, I went to the Turkish part immediately, like 2 months after the operation, and discovered a terrified group of kids. They were terrified. And they were all preparing as civil defense units, this tall. We were piling up rocks. We were trying to defend against, as kids, from something that did not happen. The first ethnic cleansing in Europe was prevented in 1974 by the Turkish military operation. That is exactly why, so many years since, the leaders on the island are drinking tea or whiskey or whatever and negotiating in full peace. Perhaps the first, the only example of its kind. In full peace, they're negotiating a political settlement to a conflict. Nobody dies. Nobody is under pressure. People are negotiating a political solution without conflict thanks to this military operation. So prevention, when Mr. Guterres, and I told him this, when we talk about prevention, usually you're not appreciated. Just imagine us not going there after the military coup on Cyprus in 1974, which came up with a certain plan to get rid of the Turks on the island and get rid of the constitutional order that was established in 1960 and lasted until 63. The conflict is long, and we act on the premise, on the understanding that if we don't find a good solution to this conflict and just withdraw and go to our own business, it will be repeated, or it can be repeated. And no one in Turkey can live with this guilt, with this weight of having left the issue without resolving it. So what happened was we came very close in 2004 when an exceptional UN Secretary General who really knew about how the UN functioned, how conflict worked, how conflict resolution worked, Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, really put all his political muscle and convinced the Americans and convinced the Europeans. Everybody jumped in. And a plan was drafted to solve once and for all the Cyprus issue. And on the 24th of April, I think it was, in 2004, there was a simultaneous referendum on two sides of Cyprus, on the Greek side and the Turkish side, on this UN plan. The Greek Cypriot leader went on the TV and started crying, really literally crying, saying that he will not abandon his current position, and he rallied people to vote against it, and he was very successful. The Greek Cypriots overwhelmingly rejected the UN plan, and the Turkish Cypriots accepted it. And 2 months later, Greek Cypriots joined the European Union as a member. And a major asymmetry was created, because until then, European Union always said, resolve your problems before you join the European Union. Don't bring your problems into the Union. Because in that asymmetry between a prospective country and a member country, that asymmetry of them being in, others being out, could not be resolved, and we still cannot resolve it. Basically, all decisions taken in the European context vis-à-vis Turkey is completely going through the prism of the Greek and the Greek Cypriot positions, purely national positions and interpretations. In conference rooms, in political conferences, that we are not present. So we were constantly shocked and surprised and incredulous about all the interpretations and everything Now, we are together with Greece in the same hole in NATO, but this is exactly what the NATO 2030 group has said, and this is exactly what NATO is working on. We do not have a NATO where the consultant, the consultation element is working very well. So we need to strengthen political consultations within NATO to make sure that we're on even terms. We don't have it, it's the EU, and it's not working. Now, we're on a new policy vis-a-vis Cyprus because there's a new president elected. Nobody contests the democratic nature of the elections on the Turkish side. He is elected, and he comes and says, look, all these years, the problem began in 1963, 74, Annan plan, all these plans, we always negotiate on the basis of some form of a federation to resolve the problem. That is not going to work. We started out as equals in 1960. We will end up as equals, but this time it will be sovereign equality, 2 states. This was one of the options that was discussed before Cyprus was founded in 1960. In the negotiations, there was a number of alternatives about how to go about with regard to creation of Cyprus coming out from the UK. And one option was the partition. And people decided to have a state that was together on the basis of the political equality. So this government in Turkish Cyprus, supported by us, are now saying it's enough. Let's solve this on the basis of sovereign equality, 2 states, who will then negotiate their relationship. So we're giving this a try. If it doesn't work, I can tell you 100 years, 600 years, 1,000 years, we will carry this baggage. We're not going to let what we prevented, the first ethnic cleansing in Europe, to happen. And I will always remember my childhood and those terrified kids who experienced things that I, in Istanbul, was not privy to. So the threat of failure is real. The current situation is tenable. We are very eagerly pushing for a solution of this, but there's an asymmetry. The Greek Cypriots will never agree to let go what they think they have, which is they go around, they say, I'm the president of Cyprus. And nobody says that, well, you're president of a part of Cyprus. And you saying this is actually against your own constitution, the 1960 constitution. Nobody's saying this. They're a member. We have an asymmetry. This isn't going anywhere. We will push for a solution on the basis of 2-state solution. Eastern Mediterranean is a new addition. With Greece, we have a complicated relationship. What happens in Eastern Mediterranean is that, well, we found hydrocarbon resources. So neither Greece nor Turkey, we don't have any hydrocarbon resources. So we're living close to some 70% of all the hydrocarbon, oil and gas resources in the entire world. 70%. All within 1-2 hour fly from Turkey. None of it, almost none of it, in Turkey. So that is very interesting, which is good because it makes you work more. We don't want to be complacent about our income. We have to work. We're a working nation. But now, at the sea, in the Eastern Mediterranean, these discoveries started coming about. The Israelis have found some, the Egyptians have found some, and in the part that is the triangle between Turkey, Greece, and the Cyprus island, there are some. And we thought, our initial premise was that great, riches to everyone, a lot of it, we'll share this equitably, and then everybody will be way better than what's the current situation. It didn't work out that way. We found ourselves in a position where, again, using this asymmetry, our neighbor Greece started building up bilateral agreements and coalitions at times also convincing our very close friends in Italy as well, their companies. People saw kind of a gold rush, and then they started issuing licenses. And there was a lot of dispute over this. And between 2003 and 2019, we just kept on proposing, protesting, not recognizing, warning, and in 2019 our Navy was out. And we told everyone that this is contested waters, these are contested resources, please do not take out oil from this without agreeing with us first. And would know that if you don't attend to a situation in the beginning, it will fester and say, I am unhappy about the current situation. I want you to talk to me. And this is exactly what we're doing. We want talks. Now, when we say talks, we talk a lot with Greece. Don't think that Greece and Turkey are two countries that never talk to each other. Basically, the eastern Greek islands completely feed off the Turkish tourists. Basically, their entire 97 whatever percent of their income is actually from Turkey. We're like very close with the Greek people. We listen to similar music. Our food is very similar. We have a complicated history, and it's not that we're not talking. We have a diplomatic process at top level, which has had its 63rd rounds, 63 rounds of what we call exploratory talks, because in the 63 rounds of talks with Greece, we could not agree on the list of disagreements. Diplomacy can be interesting sometimes, even foolish, but we can't agree with Greece what we disagree on. So they say we only disagree on the delimitation of the continental shelf and territorial waters. And we say, but no, there's a whole list of things, including this one, which is added, the delimitation-related hydrocarbon resources. Now, this map, what is this map? This map shows what we're faced up with. The red zone is the zone that is claimed by Greece and the Greek Cypriots as their territorial waters. So they say this is ours. Basically, everything on it or in it is also ours. You might think that there is kind of an opening for Turkey in the most right part, but that is Syria and then Israel and then Egypt. So that is also not ours. Turkey, which is a landmass of about 800,000 square kilometers, the biggest territory in the eastern Mediterranean, has no access to international waters, completely cut off from all hydrocarbon resources. I, as a sailor, cannot go anywhere without my passport because of these claims, which we contest. This map is what we disagree on. The red is the claimed Greek territory, and the little strip is what they see fit for the biggest landmass in Eastern Mediterranean. I don't need, I think, to say it in this many words that we will not accept this. And therefore, we want negotiations. We need to agree on the delimitation of the territorial waters, the continental shelf, the EEZ, all these things with the Greeks, who say, why should I negotiate with you when I have the EU behind me, and all these EU countries, they can rather than go to negotiation alone, I can come with them and be more powerful. Yes, this disturbs us, but basically sovereignty issues are real issues, very core issues for any nation. So whatever Turkey has will be deployed to prevent this. So, what did I say here? Excessively excessive claims. So in bottom line is that our priority is to preserve the legitimate rights of not only Turkey but also the Turkish Cypriots. They have no voice in this. They're completely cut off from anything. And we want two keywords to be applicable here. Fair, the solution has to be fair, fair to the Greeks, fair to the Greek Cypriots, fair to the Turkish Cypriots, and fair to Turkey. And of course, we cannot agree on the basis of the maximalist positions, but the negotiated solutions. And what we proposed at the end is that since other nations have also jumped in to the fold, and they said, because they have bilateral agreements with us, with the Greeks, with the others, they said, we said, well, if this is so regional, let's handle it regionally. So we proposed an Eastern Mediterranean conference, a political conference, not an academic conference, where we would sit down and discuss the future of the hydrocarbon wealth in that part. So, strategic relations, which is a high priority for Turkish foreign policy, is complicated by a number of issues, regional issues, and I just highlighted one of them, Cyprus and Eastern Mediterranean. Which brings me to the second big priority in Turkey's foreign policy. Again, that is rather imposed on us. It's not something that we can choose not to deal with. And that is, for what it's worth, we call it, or I call it, crisis management and regional security and stability. Now, what I did paint a certain international picture, and there are factors that are important for regional security as well. The mass displacement of humans, including from Syria, previously from Iraq, but also from Afghanistan, from Iran, from Pakistan. All these displacements have a certain impact on the regional situation. We also have a lot of proxy fights and geopolitical competition between the two biggest powers, the US and Russia. And we also have a number of more middle or smaller powers with lots of money who also engage in proxy conflicts and even warfare in our region. We have countries that are falling apart. There are 8 countries in our immediate neighborhood who cannot control their borders. Basically, they do not have full control over their borders. Syria has no full control over its borders. Iraq does not have full control over its borders. Georgia doesn't have full control over its borders. Azerbaijan is better now, but they had no control over their borders, and still some of their territory is contested. Ukraine does not have full control over its borders. Moldova doesn't have it. And we have a list. And that is the first circle. If you broaden the circle and you go down to Yemen and others, and Africa, then we have a lot of countries who basically do not fulfill what states do. They maintain control over a certain piece of territory. And these countries are not doing great also economically, which means that they will not be able to finance programs, public programs that will sustain efforts to assert government control over these territories. It's a difficult neighborhood. Some active, some frozen. There are conflicts that are fed by the fragility. And the COVID situation has made this even worse. So we are now gearing for a major kind of migratory movement from Afghanistan now. We're preparing for it. And then there are other possibilities of threats to regional stability and security. So how do you deal with this? How do you deal with Syria? How do you deal with these places where the country cannot resolve its problems? It starts falling apart. A conflict starts as an internal conflict, and then others started coming in to side on the part of one party or the other party, and then you face a fracturing of the situation, where you do not have two parts fighting each other, but you have like hundreds of groups fighting each other. Does anybody know how many groups fight in Syria? Well, so fractured, so fragmented, and that's a proxy fight. Every country that has certain money, certain ambition is now financing a certain group. And that is right across the border. And people are also, and Daesh is there with global operations. And we have the PKK there that wants to divide up three countries, a major separatist terrorist organization that is there with US support. One big disagreement we have with the United States, with the US support. So how do you deal with a scenario in just one country, and then we have other countries as well? Basically, we sat down and we said there's only one way to deal, because we really cannot call Mr. Guterres and say, Mr. Guterres, you have these United Nations, it's the international system, can you make it work for us? Like, can you put Syria on track? No, the talks in Geneva were completely halted when we launched the process with the Russians and the Iranians, which we call the Astana. We don't call it process, mechanism. Because they were on the ground and we really could talk with them and do what? Like save 50,000 people from Aleppo in one night. They were going to perish, and that's how the Astana mechanism was established, to open a humanitarian corridor to rescue, to evacuate whoever remained in Aleppo after like half of the city was already down. That's how the Astana process with the Russians and the Iranians came about. And the Americans were not even answering the call at the time. So they were not on the field. The Russians and the Iranians were on the field. So we worked with them to get the people. And then we worked with them to revitalize the UN process. Yes, the Russians were saying, well, why don't we like get rid of the UN process and decide the future of Syria here? And we were saying, no, that would not have any legitimacy. We cannot really shoulder this. But let's work on the deconfliction zones, no fighting zones, and start increasing these zones and start giving chance to the UN to negotiate a solution to Syrian conflict on the basis of the UN Security Council resolutions. So, but in addition to these diplomatic efforts, still it was not enough, and we deployed force. And remember that if you really want peace, sometimes you have to be prepared for war and engage. And we engaged to do what? We had 4 operations launched into Syria and Iraq to do 2 things. To push Daesh away from our borders. They were feeling rather secure across the border. And we pushed them, after which the United States picked them up around Raqqa, completely dislodged and eradicated them. But we pushed them, we dislodged them, made them on the run, so that they became vulnerable to US operations. And, well, and the international operations, but on the ground operations. We became the first country that deployed military force, boots on the ground, against Daesh. And we still are the only country that is fighting on the ground against Daesh. The other country, the United States, is using proxies or the international coalition's air cover, air support. The second one was that our intelligence was picking up entrenchment across the border for the PKK forces, which is called YPG there. Or SDF, I don't know, the acronyms keep changing. They were entrenching and they were getting ready to declare a state, a mini statelet in Syria, which would mean basically forget Syria. Syria would be divided up. So we launched another operation to dislodge them again from our border. We cleared some 4,000 square kilometers of territory from these terrorists in air, special ops, and of course land force operations. And now that 4,000 square kilometers territory that is cleared from these two organizations, you know what's happening there? People are returning there. Some 500,000 people have already returned there. They have set up schools, they have set up shops, they have built residences for them, and we're like negotiating with the EU. Please, at least at this stage, help me out. Help me out and build a working environment for them, a living environment for them, so that these people can go back to. Because our populations really wants many of these Syrians to go back, right? This is a big problem in Europe. It is a problem, growing problem in Turkey as well. It's very hard to integrate people who came overnight in such big quantities, but we want them to have a dignified, voluntary, and regulated, not chaotic, return into safe places. So we cleared the territory, and now it's time to build there and have them return if they want to, voluntarily. So this kind of policy we called an enterprising foreign policy, meaning that we take initiative, we don't wait for others, and we use various forces. And Spain has always seen the merits of seeing, as I said, of Turkey within the European Union, not outside the European Union. Spain always has seen that this location has been created by having a Europe that is defended by NATO in a certain geography, and Turkey being out of most of the Europe, which now talks within itself about what's happening in its neighborhood, what's happening about defense, or what will happen about defense industry, and all these things. So this location is manifesting itself in unbelievable, from Turkish eyes, unbelievable outcomes. For instance, we are negotiating the strategic concept for NATO. We are bringing up NATO to today's circumstances. We'll update it along 9 lines, and it will be decided in Madrid next year at the NATO summit. So, intensive work. I was part and parcel of the previous strategic concept work. I'm not part of it now, but I'm from outside. I'm looking at it with eyes that are much appreciative. I think we're on the right track. At the same time, EU is developing a strategic compass which puts Turkey as a threat to the European Union. Now, from Turkish eyes, this is Alice in Wonderland, where in NATO we're thinking about our own real defense and security, and then the EU is designating, in complete absence of Turkey, in conference rooms where no Turk can enter, Turkey is designated as a threat on par with China and Russia. And I think there's no surprise that I fully disagreed with this kind of designations of Turkey. I think I explained what we're trying to do, the limits of what we can do alone, and our desire to work with others, and our full commitment to our alliance and friendship with Spain. I should stop here before this one runs out and answer some questions.
So I'm a lucky man. I still have battery, not for long. So thank you very much, sir, for your open and comprehensive presentation with a very attractive title, which is Turkey is Global. And you just still repeat it at the end of your presentation. I think it's a good message for us and for the rest of the world. And let me just stress 2 of the many ideas and the many issues you mentioned. Let me put the stress just in two of them, in which or both countries maybe could share the same concerns or the same point of view, which is that the Mediterranean is unity. The Mediterranean Basin is a region in which our countries are located, one of them in each end of the region, and that it's a region which is surrounded by a cycle or same cycle of instability, even conflicts, even wars, and that's a shared concern because in our mutual interest is to manage this situation. It's a threatening situation, and looking for stability and well done in all this in our vicinity. So we have a few minutes before the shuttle down to Madrid. Please, the floor is yours. I repeat, short questions, because which is important is to listen to the ambassador.
Good afternoon.
Much for your presentation. Some days ago, the Berlin Conference on Libya. So I was saying that some days ago, the Berlin Conference on Libya stressed the relevance of the withdrawal of foreign military forces from the country, but we have not seen any movement in this direction. And I was wondering if you could tell us, in your view, what's preventing this from happening, and also, broadly speaking, what role Turkey does want to have in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks for bringing Libya back into the equation. It's one of the, I think, examples that kind of fit in very well with the approach we have taken to regional affairs. Now, we were not very happy about the 2011 operations in Libya, and how one of our allies just went ahead and pulled everybody in. And the transition from Gaddafi to the post-Gaddafi era was horrible. And we have a country that was in pieces. So much so that one warlord came forward, and with all these mercenaries that were financed by, I don't know, should I name names? Some very rich people, and then the Russians, they brought in all these armed mercenaries into the country, and it started attacking, launching military operations against the government that the UN recognized as the legitimate government. So that was the picture that we responded to. When they called for help, we deployed help. As a result, we have a situation where there is a government now in Libya, a very uneasy. They're preparing for elections, they're preparing for their future, they're negotiating their future, but they're no longer fighting. And the legitimate government is in place. What we're saying is that Libya is for Libyans. The future of Libya will have to be decided by the Libyans. No one really can impose a future on Libya. But the only reason why this government is able to negotiate, and rather than fight with this warlord, is because we intervened. We want to pull back, but we're saying that some others have to go first, like all these forces that are part and parcel of Haftar's forces, the aggressive forces. So what we're espousing is that a planned, regulated withdrawal of all forces from Libya. Not, oh, okay, let me leave then kind of withdrawal. Because as of last week, Mr. Haftar, or General Haftar, was already threatening more operations. With what forces? With all these foreign mercenaries. Just imagine how long the peace would have stuck if people who are deployed on the side of the legitimate government. And when I say UN recognized government, legitimate is not Turkey's legitimate favorite government. It's the UN recognized government. Can hold against Haftar if the pullback is unregulated. So that's all we're saying. We will not be the first ones to leave. and leave everything to Wagner.
Sir, thanks plenty for your extraordinary presentation on the area.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to ask you, what is your take or your prospect of the future? What is going to happen and what are your lessons from this cooperation with the Russians, Iranians in the area, and also the US troops involved in this sort of operations? Because in the beginning we thought there were many hopes, placed on this cooperation, and then the Crimean invasion by the Russians made it very difficult. The inability from the West to identify who was worthwhile relying on to conduct pacification in the area. And what do you think will be the role of Assad's regime in the future, if there is anything, or it needs to be replaced by anyone else?
Thank you for your question. I think that the blueprint for the future of Syria is already set out by UN Security Council resolution 2214, is it? 2254, whatever. A resolution that says that Syria is one country, that it will not fall into pieces, it will be territorially and politically united, and there will be a process to elect a new leadership or a leadership, and based on a certain constitution. That is the future of Syria. I think that will sooner or later have to come into play. And I think the United States, Europe, Turkey, all of us will have to join forces again, like we were at the beginning of the Syrian conflict, until the US hesitated and the Russians came in and completely kind of changed the terrain. We had to go back and work towards that UN Security Council resolution-based end game, end state for Syria. Can it happen? Yes, it can happen. This despite the fact that Assad, together with Russia and Iranian support, has been able to capture most of the territory. We still hold together the key to legitimacy of anything that will come out at the end, hopefully, of this Syrian tragedy. And for that, I think I should assert that the Astana arrangement between Russia, Iran, and Turkey was never designed, intended, used, employed as an instrument towards the end state, or towards an end game in the Syrian context. That will have to be negotiated in the UN context, and it will have to be accepted by all parties that are in all legitimate parties in Syria. Who is legitimate, who is not, is a big diplomatic or political contention, and that is under discussion. Those discussions in Geneva, I think all of us will need to support. So I know what cannot happen or must not happen, but how to get to what should happen, which is the UN Security Council resolution. I think we still have to work very much on bringing US, Europe, and Turkey on one side. That is not happening. I think Turkey, Europe has some divisions. United States is hesitant, was hesitant in the Trump era, is hesitant now in the Biden era. But at any rate, it will also have to include a way of bringing Turkey into the fold, because the logic of the Astana, the reason why it has worked so many years and why it has prevented so many lives, is because Turkey took on itself to speak in favor of the opposition, Russia in favor of Assad, together with the Iranians. If we were not there, there would be no one speaking on behalf of the opposition, and then the slaughter would just continue. I think the answer is somewhere around that. Us coming together on the basis of the UN resolution.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much for your conference. It was really interesting.
Thank you, sir.
In short, I would like to ask you a question about the interest that Turkey has in the Middle East, but not only in Syria, but go further to the south and to the Horn of Africa, where the European countries, some European countries has a lot of interest there. And what will be the position of Turkey in that way?
Sure. Let me go back to the map. That would help me explain the story there. It's sorry, I thought there was a map. Anyways, Turkey has been reaching out to Africa because of a certain geographical imagination that puts Turkey not only in the place where Asia meets Europe, but also where Africa meets Asia and Europe. And that connectivity is fostered by some very direct engagement economically with countries of Africa, including the sub-Saharan Africa. And now, as of now, we have embassies in 43 countries of Africa. Very few countries have remained where we're not physically present, where we do business. And when I talk about business, I'm reading from the figures. In 2002, it was 4 billion. Now we have reached 25 billion during the pandemic. So the numbers will be even higher this year and much higher next year. So the trade figures are rising. And that is our Africa policy, basically. We cannot be the 10th largest economy in the world, our overarching objective, by ignoring Africa or by ignoring Asia. With Asia, there's a lot of crowding out happening. A lot of countries are there. With Africa, attention is less. Now, if some competition is felt, this is not because we compete. And I think we find ourselves mostly competing with the Chinese in many places, which are like unanimously present over there, who are mostly competing, sensing competition not from Turkey but from India. So in this complex, competitions, what we're trying to do is to increase our economic relations with them, also our political interactions as far as they relate to international forums go, like the UN General Assembly or the G20. That's the political dimension. And I think that is no threat to anyone. We have not a policy that is anything else. We are actually against those policies that would dominate or impose on African nations certain political outcomes, certain political behavior. Africa is the continent is the continent of the future. Asia is the continent of today. And we're just preparing for the African half century, if you will. I don't know if I have answered your question.
It was a little bit more explain if you tell us about the influence with China and the influence in Turkey in the same area, and can be a point of conflict between Turkey and China, and what that affect to the European interest in that part of the world, because that is very close to the Mediterranean and probably will be the next situation for future conflicts there.
Yes. Well, let me then be more specific. France sees a certain competition with Turkey in a number of countries. I don't know of many other countries who see a similar sense of competition. I can say this, we're not competing. We are trying to develop our trade and economic and international political contacts. With China, we have never been approached by the Chinese saying that they're competing with us or we're competing with them. So we sensed no kind of displeasure on the side of the Chinese for this. That's basically, they do not see it as a kind of an imperial backyard or remaining imperial thing. We do not have an imperial policy with regard to Africa. We don't have an imperial legacy with regard to Africa. We have in some other countries, in some other geographies, not in Africa. And this is no longer an imperial era. Therefore, I don't think we will come to a blow with the Chinese on this one. But in all regional policies, in whichever geography, I think some of the questions that come about with regard to Turkey is because Turkey is less part of the European network now than before. Because before was defined by NATO membership and the Council of Europe membership. Now is defined by the EU, where we're not present. EU talks about Africa without Turkey. EU talks about Middle East without Turkey. EU talks about Syria without Turkey, Iran without Turkey, the Caucasus without Turkey, Russia without Turkey. Every regional country and region without Turkey, although Turkey is present, active in all these geographies and considers itself as a NATO country and as a European country. That asymmetry, that dislocation exists in the European minds of the latter years, where the European integration process has progressed by forgetting what Europe was. Europe starts from Turkey, ends in Spain and Portugal. That has been Europe in the last 60 years. And that concept has allowed Europe to be this rich and this stable, because we have defended Europe, European wealth and European security. Now changing it and expecting that the same will continue for Europe is not realistic. It will have to come to terms with the idea that whatever our differences may be, some say religious differences, some say, well, you're too big as a population, whatever it is, it's not economic. We're not poorer than most of the EU. That dislocation, that asymmetry that was created in the last 10, 20 years, once it's overcome, I think we will sit down and think together about what we will do in Africa against the Chinese.
Well, time is over. The ambassador said that Africa is the continent of the future. I fully agree with you, sir. That Asia is the continent of the present, but he didn't say that Europe is the continent of the past. I hope.
Europe is forever.
So, thank you very much again, sir. Sorry for the technical harassment. It was not intentional. And I think that Captain Aznar was fully right when he suggested to include this presentation in this course. So we are very happy. And sir, looking forward to having you again here or in any other scenario, because it will be very, very interesting and very useful for both parts. We fully understood your points. You have very, very clearly put it on the table, and so we are very happy to have joined this meeting with you. Sir, thank you very much, and looking forward to the next occasion, please.